talk to you today about why a Tesla coil puts out a radiant field. Why it's not static, why it's not magnetic. Both things are needed in order to create the Tesla coil field, but the Tesla coil field itself is a radiant field. Let's go to our first example. If I took your voltage and drove it up right there, that's my voltage, that means that my frequency would also be high, and then my amperage would be low. That's static, okay? If I wanted a field that has to do with magnetics, then my voltage is low, my frequency is low, and my amperage is high. That's a magnetic field. Both are on the same scale. If I wanted static, it'd be here. If I wanted magnetic, it would be here. That's a very simple way to understand the two. Now, a lot of people get this confused. A Tesla coil puts out my magnetic here in my number 1 winding. It puts out the static here in my number 2 winding. So the assumption would be it's going to be static electricity. However, it's not. They're failing to realize something that's going on in the process that makes it different. So let's isolate that. If it was static, the entire room would feel staticky, but it doesn't. It feels like the room is actually filling up with energy. Why is that? Because when I oscillate the magnetic field into my static field, I now get a radiant field. You see, there's no static that comes off of this. Not at all. If I am in DC, you may have a small breakout, but the less the breakout, the more energy there is in the room. The higher the value of resonance you can achieve. The spark itself is a hindrance to that resonance. Knowing that, why is this working the way it is? This right here is transverse. This is longitudinal. They create a pulse that way, but in here, you're creating an impulse. This right here builds out in the radiant field. There is no semblance of magnetism in it, and there is no static in it. Or at least not on a level that you can truly detect. Both are always present in the radiant field, but it's not at a level that's a great deal like you would in a Wilmshurst machine when you want static. Completely different process. It's a radiant field. Let's take this a step further. I'm simply going to take this hose, I'm going to go to a compressor, and I'm going to suck the air out of this. I am going to go over here to my high voltage, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to stick my anode here, my cathode here. So this is negative, this is positive. When I suck the air out, this right here fills up the entire thing. Everything in here is 100% full of energy. It builds out in one color and goes throughout the entire thing. But that's radiant energy. It has a color because there's a color coming off of this right here, and it's usually pink. But the difference in the two creates the radiant energy. Now, that we can see that, it's time to move on to the other part. We're not going to change the high voltage source. But this time I'm going to put it in a conventional spark gap. What happens in here is the energy builds out that looks like this. That is the spark that's going on there. Now this field and the radiant field that's going on here are built almost the same way. I changed the geometry to get to this, and I took out the air. So why does this have lines? It's because the air is right there. You're going to have plasma, air, plasma, air, plasma, air, plasma, air, plasma, air. That's the way the spark gap builds out. In this, you have no air. Therefore, it's radiant, but it's positive of the radiant field. Now we can understand this better. I said earlier that we have a negative radiant and a positive radiant. Why? In your Tesla coil, out here is your radiant, but it's positive. There's your radiant negative. Both have different properties, but you can flip between the two, or you can flip back to a static or magnetic field. Now, we want to use the negative radiant because we want to use it in air. We want air to be able to be held in by this. You see, in the positive radiant, you just have the radiant field and it's all energy inside of it. We want to be able to use the air itself. Therefore, we're going to have to use the negative side of it. Now, in that same example, the radiant and negative, now I can break down that same radiant field back into the spark gap. All I have to do is a field flip. It's already right bad, you have to get over it. Field flip, that's all I need to do. Why is this so important? This is why the Tesla coil is an anti-gravity machine. There's no getting around what it is. We want, in this field, once we create it, back to where it needs to be. The field flip is taking the radiant, converting it back to the lines. We want to be here. We now want to travel from here to here. This is your scalar. That's how you're going to do it. Now, does it work when you take your Tesla coil and field flip it? Well, the answer is yes, it does. When I take my Tesla coil here and I put the rod down the center, now I am going to simply take a bipolar Tesla coil. There's my primary, there's my two sides. I'm going to connect this one wire right here. One wire energy. Connect it right here, what happens? This goes back to magnetic, or static. It's now on that scale here, where it came out of here radiant. Now I field flipped it back. Why is this so important? You see, there's a couple of clues that you need to understand. You take two magnets, you compress them together, you put a rod in between them, and you cinch them real tight. The force between them creates an irritation between them. It is the same thing as going down the hallway in your socks and creating static electricity, except for this is on a different scale. This now will slow down when you put it off the side of a building versus a regular magnet. Why? You're causing that friction. That amount of energy right there is doing the field flip for you. That is the exact thing you need to personify in anti-gravity. It is changing a radiant field that we're in into the lines again, into the scalar, by a simple field flip. Now, what is the part that most people do not understand about this is the temperature differential. You see, the temperature in your system matters because the hotter it is means the more amperage you have in the system. The colder it is means the more voltage you have in the system. But it plays out in the same way on Earth. When you're on the ground, the radiant energy heats up the ground that you walk on. Yet when you get to the sky, it's cold. The energy up there is also static. So now it's static radiant energy that's up there that you can pull with the corona motor. You can also pull an earth battery out of the ground because of the amperage. It has to do with the hot and cold of both. As you move up from one level to the next, from the ground all the way up to the sky, the frequency changes. That is scalar. Temperature and frequency differential are scalar. We know we're in a radiant energy field. Why? Because light doesn't work exactly the way you think it does. You see, everything in here is actually dark. What we're looking at is the reflection of each item gives its color. Everything has a value to it. Therefore, there's radiant energy all in this room. It is each item in the room that's giving us the feedback so our eyes can see the color. That's the same way a radiant field builds out. It's everywhere. It's in everything. It pushes through everything. In testing of Tesla coils, I find this to be 100% correct. There is no cage that you can put on it to cover this up. It goes right through it. It has no problem. Why? Because radiant simply means the lower form of radiation. They're on two opposite sides of the scale. Radiant, radiation. Radiation's really bad. Radiant's not so bad. But just like everything else, as the sun pushes its energy towards our Earth, we get our field pushed back on us. Therefore, that radiant field starts to transform into a radiation field, so we feel it on our bodies. Now, there are simple fields to understand here. Electromagnetism, we have a static, and we have a radiant field. All of them controlled by frequency. One of the strangest tests that I do with a Tesla coil is I take it and I put it in pure resonance. The greatest quality of resonance that you can get out of that coil. The signal is 5 to 10 times stronger than any field that you would normally get out of a Tesla coil. Yet, if you put it above 13 volts, the field breaks and goes into regular resonance again. Anything under that, so the less power that you have, the more the frequency is amplified. Why would this be? Well, it's a little different in resonance versus regular frequency. You have to understand that first. The two are not the same. They're isolated as different things. When you're in resonance, you are pulling energy in from the surrounding area. If you're in your room, you are simply pulling that radiant energy from your room into your coil, producing a higher amount of energy. The impedance is actually the voltage that you put in. It's backwards of what most people think. You would normally say, add more energy, add more energy. But it doesn't work that way. It works in reverse. It doesn't care so much about the energy. It cares about the frequency itself. When setting up wireless in a Tesla coil, you want to put it 5 feet across the room for a simple test. Whatever the number 2 winding that you set over there by itself with nothing else attached to it has to be the same frequency that's in your primary running Tesla coil in resonance. Not the frequency of it, not the tested frequency of it, but in resonance. When it oscillates between the transverse and longitudinal field in it, in resonance, that value has to be the same as the winding on the coil across the room. Then it'll wirelessly start up, but it does it in scalar. So as this one goes, you'll get a field of energy. Then you'll get a stop of that energy for a distance. Then the field around this coil will start up and you have energy there. It is precisely that loss of energy in the middle that told you it was a scalar field. We know it's radiant. We understand our Earth is radiant. What is one of the biggest troubles to get past in this whole thing is to understand what you're really dealing with in the Earth. It's not AC and DC. Those things are man-made. DC is the closest field that we understand that's like the Earth. What is the Earth? It is actually crystal. You are compressing crystal. Crystal is made out of radiation. You compress it, it acts like radiation. It pushes out a field. Here's the trick. There's 2 types of it. When you compress it in a Tesla coil, in the center you get negative radiant field. That means this. As you compress it, it builds back out into a bigger field. In radiation, when you compress it, that's the positive side, it comes out and it's harmful. In the negative, it's not. The biggest difference in the 2 is that we are in a negative radiant field in our Earth, created by crystal. It mimics DC. We use it in DC systems, but we do not realize that it's actually the energy of the Earth itself. The compressed crystal itself puts out the radiant field. Now that we understand that, we can start to understand why anti-gravity works. That part becomes simple. It is radiant until you create it back into the lines. And it only happens in a small locality as that magnet drops. It is that heat itself that's causing this to change. You are now field flipping based on the heat in the system. I know that sounds strange because normally most people don't talk about the heat and cold in the system, but it's very important when you go to build things out. In Tesla coils, in order to flip it from one field to the next, it's essential to know it. There's different forms of heat. Can you explain it besides RF when you sit there and your Tesla coil is resonating in everything in your room? And I'm not talking the 3-foot radius. We're talking everything in your room is RF hot. Every piece of metal. Not a couple feet out, not the regular field, it's everything. Why? Because I'm changing the field in my room. This room's field is changing. I am now converting it to something different. This is the understanding of the different fields. If you think it's static, you're mistaken. Stand next to a Tesla coil in full operation, there's no static. Put a magnet over top it and turn it. There's no magnetism. You say, well, it's an air core transformer. It converts magnetism into a static energy, or it converts amperage into a voltage. Well, I'm not disagreeing with that, but I'm telling you the field that comes out because of the oscillation between the transverse and longitudinal is a radiant field. It is that very oscillation with 2 different types of fields that changes this. You will know it in every scalar Tesla coil by the sphere they put into it. Why is that so important? Well, it changes the geometry of how you understand something. You see, you want a radiant field that builds out in 360 degrees. You don't want it building out in a pinpoint. In a pinpoint, it's a focus point of energy. In a sphere, it's not. It becomes radiant to the room. There's a big difference in the two. You are literally changing the type of field that you're in by how you focus the energy. Now, we can start to field flip and change things. All we have to know is how to do it. You know, another experiment that I do so that we understand this is I could convert the energy into just about anything. I put the rod down the center, I put it into a burrito, and I laugh at this simple experiment every time. Because not a lot of people understand what I'm doing. They think you're just playing with your food. What I'm actually doing is something like Edwin Gray was trying to show you. I'm taking radiant energy and I'm compressing it inside of that tortilla itself. Now, if I put mineral oil on the outside of that tortilla, I can compress it even further. The further I compress that field, the closer I get to radiation. It becomes like the Manhattan Project or the Demon Core. It's fine to be around in a radiant field before it's closed. When you enclose it and compress it in that way, you create a radiation field. It is precisely that openness to it that allows it to stay radiant before it turns to radiation. That is how you understand the difference in how it works. We can convert a lot of fields in a Tesla coil. From one to the next, we can light up things from across the room. The negative radiant energy goes into the water table and it will allow you to light up a light bulb within 3 to 5 feet of that water. You can place it into mud, that same energy, and still light up a light bulb 3 to 5 feet from it. The understanding of this is extraordinary. People say that Tesla wanted to create a field around his Tesla coil to give wireless energy. But that wouldn't work out so well because of everything being RF hot as soon as you turn it on. For anybody who's built resonance in a Tesla coil, you'd understand this thing. You'd understand that you could not physically do that in the air without harming people. So what was he trying to do? The secret is in the Wardenclyffe Tower. As the rod goes down the center, it goes into the water table. As it goes into the water based on the center of the Tesla coil itself, it creates a negative radiant energy. That energy could be picked up in the water table all over the world. It depends how many sources are turning it on. One Tesla coil is good. 2 Tesla coils in operation together work coherently in order to give you all that energy. That's what he was trying to do. That's why the discovery in Egypt is so vastly huge in its understanding. If you can understand what Tesla did at Wardenclyffe, you can understand this. You'll be able to simply put a light bulb into the ground and have it start. What you know is an earth battery when you build it out now becomes an energy field. Now you can place a 4-foot light bulb into the ground and it'll light up bright. You are playing with the water table of the entire earth when you create multiple ones all over the world. It is a network of an energy system. All you have to do is create it the same way it's supposed to be built. This is why crystals is so important to this. We don't understand this yet, but when we do, it's going to be a huge, mind-blowing experience. You have quartz. When quartz is compressed, it's creating this radiant energy field. If you do it in multiple locations around the earth, you're mimicking the energy of the earth itself. Therefore, things work what look like is DC to us, but really what it is it's that energy from the crystal. You know, I talk about sacred geometry on this channel as well. And what you have to really understand about that is that it has to do with the oxygen in a crystal structure. Every oxygen molecule that's in there is going to give it a different frequency, and it's going to work as a combination lock. Let me show you this real quick. It's very interesting how the Tesla coil actually works like this versus what people think. When I have a higher frequency, I'm in here. This is my center point right here of my field. It goes like this. Comes out, goes in, goes back in, comes out, goes around, goes back in, comes out, goes around, comes out, goes back in. I'll say that's a pretty interesting symbol you got going on there. So let's walk through it. I put it in resonance. As I go through the scale, it builds back down, then it drops off. Right here, it builds back out in resonance again. It comes around and goes down again. Then it pops out into resonance again. All that's known in the Tesla coil. If you took the radio frequency method and put it on a Tesla coil, this is what you would find. This exact shape right here. This is your understanding of a Tesla coil, but maybe you don't draw it like that. Maybe it's like this. Maybe the understanding is a little more what nature keeps providing. The resonance inside it's making shapes. If you look at a mandala, every single one of them has these shapes. You get the energy. You're going to get the winding pattern as you go through it. Everything is wound in a very specific way. You continue to get winding patterns at it, and mine obviously is horrible, never draw that again on the fly, but you're going to get that. You're going to find this pattern when you start to put it in water. It starts to build out this way. There are certain frequencies that are constructive, certain ones that are deconstructive. 432, constructive. 440, deconstructive. It's a difference in which one you're in. We should really go back to the harmonic scale that they originally had. The one that they put out is distortion. It's bad for us. If you're thinking that that's the frequency you need to use in the system, you're wrong. Let me show you another misnomer about a Tesla coil so we understand this. If my Tesla coil is this big versus this big, where's my frequency at? In the bigger Tesla coil, your frequency goes down. In a smaller Tesla coil, your frequency goes up in oscillation. Number 1 to number 2, oscillating with each other creates your radiant field. So your frequency changes. This is a scale you judge it by. So if we look at Wardenclyffe Tower, what is he going for? That frequency has to be low. Not a high frequency, it's a low frequency. Why? Well, remember that scale that we had earlier. We wanted to say right here, I need magnetism on that side and I need static on this side. Remember, we said this one, low amps. Excuse me, this one was high amps. This one is low amperage. So what happens in the Tesla coil when you change the frequency? As you bring the frequency down, remember the conversion. The conversion told you we're going to this. We took a radiant field, we're converting it over to a magnetic field. We now have more amps in our system. In a Tesla coil, oh man, I'm starting to draw bad today. As you put this thing down there, a piece of wood, okay? As I put that down there, I am now changing the field. I am now putting a core into it, which anybody knows from transformer building, means that my amperage has now gone up. I now have a higher amperage field than this. I now need to adjust that with capacitance. This is Rodin Cliff 101. I have a coil and I have a coil. They both are putting off a field. If your coil is built like this, the field is in here in the center and you are losing it. That's bad. You don't want that. This right here gives you the level of capacitance. Right there. The simple distance between this one and this one is your capacitance level. Why is that important? If you go from resonant down here to an amperage field down here, and you're doing it in radiant energy, when you come to the center of your Tesla coil, you need a capacitor in order to adjust that entire thing. It's adjusting the frequency in your system. That's what those two coils are. Bifilar coils are doing that. Putting them so close together like this, like a stereo wire, with one on top of the other, is a failure because you're not using the field that you should be using. It's very precisely the field in between the two that you need to adjust. You could put a plate in the center and a light bulb connected to it. As you bring these two plates, these two coils down, that plate will be saturated with energy and turn on the light bulb. That should tell you exactly what they're doing in your system. There's a lot of people out there that think that that system right there with the bifilar coils is how it's done and that they're somehow Tesla coils. They're not. They're capacitors. A Tesla coil is very specific in the way that it's built, and there's a reason for that. In order to get the radiant field, and Tesla said this himself that it's radiant, you have to have the Tesla coil configuration. Otherwise, you just have a capacitor. In every test that you do, it's going to show a capacitor. When you put in radiant energy to both sides, put a light bulb in the center, what happens? The light bulb turns on. You're exciting the gas based on the radiant energy itself. There's no hiding that. That's what's going on. Tesla coil is a conversion machine. It changes your magnetic and static into a radiant field. You can get a positive value, you can get a negative value. Field flipping is important. Knowing this, think about it. If you know that there's a radiant field everywhere and all I need to do is get it to go and change just a little bit so I can get in between those frequency lines. In every Tesla coil that you do, you see it. The breakout comes in at one point, it comes out as frequency lines. You need to get in between there. In that air, we are in a negative radiant energy field. It builds out this way, it shows it this way. We have to start understanding things like this. This is why the Tesla coil is so important. There's a lot of things out there that you can build, but this is going to be one of the greatest understandings that you get. You literally need to know this if you're anywhere close to anti-gravity. If you're not using your Tesla coil this way, you're not going to understand it. So this next level that we go to, you'll be completely mystified on why it works. When I take that negative radiant energy field, I can hold in the static field. I know there's a conversion there, I've done it. But it's precisely because of what they are and the frequency that they're at that I can do this. I can hold in the energy with a static field in there. We know it as time dilation inside the Earth. It builds out as two fields, crossing one another, just like this. We're in the inside of that. We are in the time dilation bubble itself. That's where we're standing on the surface of the Earth. It means that we're building in between two fields. A lot of people like to say it's just positive and negative, and that would be a misunderstanding of what we're standing in. It's radiant. It always has been and it always will be. Therefore, you must treat it as such. When you create something in your lab, like a Tesla coil, and understand this, now you can manipulate it in order to flip it. I can flip this thing at will. I know exactly which field I need to be in and exactly the strength I need to be into it. You know, I was watching the Integrotron earlier, and I don't think people understand that that's just a time dilation device. It's simple. It's the same thing as Hutchinson. You're taking the area in the inside and you're saturating it with static. You have to ionize the air. That's what the spark is for. You have to create the Tesla field for that negative radiant energy to compress and build out. Now you're in a time dilation field. I'd like to say it's more complicated than that, but really it's not. It doesn't take very many parts. I've built it several times. You'll know it when the energy comes out in your room everywhere. Now, I know a lot of people that research UFOs and they have no idea what I'm talking about. Not one. Not one clue. I wish they did. It'd be easier to communicate with them. But they don't. If you don't understand the field flip, the fields that you're in, you'll never build it. You'll never understand why. Until you stand in the room where the radiant energy is and see it coming from your Tesla coil and see it go through every single thing that you put in front of it. Except for what? Mineral oil. The viscosity of it changes it. It still goes through it. It takes some time. It's the same thing as tars in our Earth. As soon as you have something like that in our Earth, you create something that it has trouble getting through. It'll build out around it, but it has trouble getting through it. It'll create anomalies on our planet where something appears like it's anti-gravity because you're now changing the field in that locality. It all works. It all fits, and it's all coming to fruition in the lab.
The old man built. The old man built. The old man built. The old man built. The old man builds is broken in the head. People not seeing reality has put them in the red. Where conscious and spirituality restricted from the norm and replaced with the ignorance of basic magnetic form. The geometry of God keeps running through his head. That's what makes old man builds broken in the head. The old man builds. The old man builds. Spheres of destiny are spinning in his mind, making him travel back and forth in time, battling the establishment for just a little recognition. Has him forcing the world to understand his premonition. That world will have all the technology in the end, even if it means his life will fail to extend. The old man builds. The old man builds. The old man builds. The old man builds. Fears of destiny are spinning in his mind, making him travel back and forth in time, battling the establishment for just a little recognition. Has him forcing the world to understand his premonition. That world will have all the technology in the end, even if it means his life will fail to extend. The old man builds. The old man builds. The old man builds. The old man builds. Of destiny are spinning in his mind, making him travel back and forth in time, battling the establishment for just a little recognition. Has him forcing the world to understand his premonition. That world will have all the technology in the end, even if it means his life will fail to extend.